Good evening, everyone. I would like to call the meeting to order at 7:01. Michelle, can you please read the sunshine law?
This is a regular meeting of the Mayor and Council of the Borough of Keyport, Tuesday, March 2nd, 2021. Let the minutes show that adequate notice of this meeting as required by Public Law 1975, Chapter 231, has been provided by the annual notice, which has been posted on the bulletin boards filed with the Borough Clerk and has been sent to the Asbury Park Press, the Independent, the Star Ledger, and the Two River Times.
Thank you. Can I please have roll call?
Mayor Kennedy,
Here.
Council President Good,
Here.
Councilmember Pacheco,
Sorry, here.
Councilmember Fotopoulos,
Here.
Councilmember McDermott,
Here.
Councilmember Davidson,
Here.
Councilmember McNamara.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. If you could please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Everyone can please remain standing and dedicate this moment of silence to everyone's lives as the numbers keep increasing to the COVID-19 pandemic, though that have been affected. Thank you. I'd like to read a proclamation, dedication to National Women's History Month. Whereas National Women's History Month was declared by Congress in 1987 to celebrate the contributions and achievements that women made over the course of American history. And whereas in 1889, Anna Bissell became the first woman CEO. After her husband's death and with 5 children, she took over the Bissell business, known for its carpet sweepers and vacuum cleaners. By 1899, she had created the largest organization of its kind in the world. And whereas Amelia Earhart was the first female aviator to fly across the Atlantic Ocean. And whereas Katherine Johnson started high school at the early age of 10 years old, and by the time she was the age of 15, she began college to become a mathematician. She worked for NASA for more than 30 years, where her math helped send astronauts to the moon and back in 1969. And whereas in 1981, Sandra Day O'Connor became the first woman appointed to the United States Supreme Court, and she held that position until she retired in 2006. And whereas Therese Aumack Walling Seabrook came to Keyport in 1832 with her parents, Catherine Aumack and Leonard Walling, 2 years after the town's founding. Therese was the honorary president of the Monmouth County Suffrage Society, a founder of the Keyport chapter of the Women's Christian Temperance Union, an active member in various charitable groups, and she was a delegate to both the National WCTU Convention and National Women's Suffrage Association. Whereas J. Mabel Brown was an editor and publisher of the Keyport Weekly and was the first woman to belong to the New Jersey Press Association. She also served on many national editorial committees. And whereas Juanita Hall, an actress born in Keyport on November 6, 1901, was best known for her roles in stage and film versions of the Rodgers and Hammerstein musicals South Pacific, in which her role as Bloody Mary garnered her a Tony Award, and for her role as Auntie Lang in Flower Drum Song. Now, therefore, I do hereby proclaim March 2021 as National Women's History Month and ask the citizens of the borough to recognize the legacies of the women who have helped shape our nation and to remember that we are all tasked with writing the next chapter of women's history. Thank you. Before we open it up to the public, I just want to ask council members if there's anything on the agenda that they're going to be requesting to pull, or any commentary you would like to add before we open up to the public that may clear anything up prior to public asking questions.
I just had one question about 8121. It's just a logistics question. The mailers are supposed to go out on the 5th, and I just want to make sure that that time frame is still going to work because it's the 2nd. All right, that's all I had. Thanks.
Jay, do you know that answer?
Oh, Jay just gave me the thumbs up, I thought. Sorry.
Okay, I didn't see that, sorry. Okay,
Mayor, I have just one thing on 8021, and I'd actually just like to confirm from Ms. London that our 8021 is stated properly. I'm concerned that some of the language is missing from the County Board of Health letter. I don't see the County Board of Health letter in here, but there was a comment that said a plan review will be required for any alterations to the second floor, such as the construction of facilities to hold or prepare food or drinks or any other activities which would render any portion of the second floor preparation area. And I just didn't see any mention of that. I saw the language about the parking lot in the resolution, but not the second floor. And I just want to make sure that we're okay.
It is mentioned in the resolution under the now therefore provisions. It mentions the application is approved and it refers to the second floor in the parking lot. And it also mentions that it's subject to the county's conditions.
Right.
And the county.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. And the county's approval letter was mentioned in the whereas clauses. So it does incorporate the county's condition.
Okay, because it had mentioned that in that now therefore be it resolved section, to add the second floor and the entire parking lot as depicted in the drawings submitted, and there were no drawings for the second floor. So I just wanted to double check because we still haven't seen any drawings on what's proposed for the second floor.
I thought the subsequent drawing that he submitted indicated the upstairs. It wasn't an entire drawing of the floor, but did indicate, I think, second floor. So there wasn't, you're correct, there isn't a floor plan that has been submitted for the second floor.
Okay, so the Board of Health conditions are definitely included in the resolution we're passing?
Yes, and I think we can probably just add and include a reference to including the county letter as part of the resolution, as set forth in the county and is attached. So we'll make a reference that it is attached. So that way it's definitely with the resolution.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
okay. Also, I'd like to point out just for the members of the public that I'm not sure which version of the agenda you saw, if you saw today's or Friday's, but our 7821 is being moved to the March 16th meeting. And then the packet that was posted today, that was the only one, so that was fine for the amended right payment of bills. Okay. Any other council members have any commentary?
Actually, I do, Mayor. This one might be for Jay. I don't know if you know this one. With regard to 8121, the locker rentals, do you know how many Keyport residents submitted applications for the lockers. I know we have a limited number. I can't hear you.
Yeah, we can't.
Oh, there we go.
Okay. Is that better?
I
Yep.
think they're hearing you
Okay.
through mine now.
Good enough.
It is my understanding that all but 2 are resident. And there are 18 available.
Okay, so my only concern is that because of the opportunity for the renewal, I would hate to think that there are a lot of Keyport residents that are, looking for these, but then having some people, families kind of locking them down. But if you're saying that really everybody that Keyport residents got their opportunity, is that a fair statement?
Based on the numbers, I would say yes.
Okay, thank you.
And we have, just for everyone, we have 18 lockers that are for rent.
Well, there's 18 in total. Some of them are going to be renewal, so it's not like there's 18 open spaces, correct?
There's 18 in total that are available.
Yeah,
Right.
the idea was to
Right.
give the people that had them right of first refusal, basically.
Okay, so that's all. Can I please have a motion to open to the public?
Motion.
Motion, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, members of the public, I just want to point out that these are for discussion items on the consent agenda, as well as communications by consent. The public hearing will have its own public session, and the unfinished business of discussion of legalization of recreational marijuana will have its own public session. So this is for communications and consent agenda public session. Anyone on video, we'll go by show of hands first, and then we'll turn it over to the phone lines. Mr. Graham? Can you unmute yourself, Mr. Graham, please?
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
All right. Thank you. 22 Elmer J. Graham Jr., 22 St. Peter's Place, Keyport. Can you all explain Resolution 7921?
Yes. Jay?
Yes, this is a contract for animal control services.
Okay.
That includes any animals that are encountered that require any sort of control activity.
All right. Can you explain Resolution 8121 again?
Sure. When they did the renovations of Benjamin Terry Veterans Park, one of the items was to build a kayak locker in Veterans Park area, so that residents would hopefully be more inclined to do non-motorized water activity more frequently, as opposed to having the challenge of getting the kayak down there. So it allows them to leave it there and they'll rent it for the season.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Welcome. Any other show of hands before we go to the phone lines? Anyone on the phone lines?
Michael Lane, 51 First Street, Keyport.
Hi, Mr. Lane.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. First item is the resolution for McDonough's. And then the third whereas, it says it's located at 2 West Front Street. That doesn't align with the applications. The application said 2 West Front Street and 6-10 West Front Street.
But is it my understanding that it's the original base is 2 West Front Street and then it's expanding to 6 and 10? So a place of origin would be 2, correct or no?
No, the application was corrected to say the location was 2 West Front Street and 610 West Front.
No, I understand with the application, but I'm saying for the resolution, I guess I'm deferring the question to Ms. London, is that the overall process is that they're expanding the 2 West Front Street liquor license to be cumbersome of 6 and 10. So I think because it's an expansion, it starts with the original location of 2. Is that correct, Ms. London?
I'm looking at the application, and the actual address where the license is to be used, it does indicate 2,6-10 West Front Street.
But the original site is 2, correct? For the liquor license that's on file, if there was no expansion request, it would just be 2 West Front Street, correct?
I don't know the original, maybe, can the clerk?
She's confirming that's correct. So 6-10 is the resolution of what we're going to approve, because that's the expansion part.
And it does, whereas refers to the existing license at the premises at 2 West. So you're
That's
correct.
what I would think, but Michelle? Do you want to unmute so they can hear you?
Yes, the original location is, the existing location of the license is 2 West Front Street. And the expansion would go into 6-10 West Front Street. That's my understanding.
So can we add a whereas into the resolution, Ms. London?
Yes, we can add that.
Mr. Lane? We can add a whereas to include that the expansion is to include 6-10.
I think you need to do that, yes.
Okay.
All right, the second item relative to this resolution is real concerned about the quality of the application, not at the level of previous applications that have been heard by this board. Almost to the point, I think the board should be embarrassed. If you look at the detailed sketch, it says that we can't close the border between the borough parking lot and lot 11.01 for fire truck access. That's just not fact. It's very straightforward to put a gate and a fence with gating in there for fire access. There's multiple locations in town which are fenced with gates that trucks can go through. The sketch really doesn't delineate how the licensed area is going to be controlled. And we have a history in town where a site which is not well fenced in, we've had control problems. In addition, fencing will allow you to secure the site during off hours. This is a huge site which needs to be secured. A gate in the fence will allow you to really ensure that the patrons who access it are of age, etc. And finally, as I said, the gate for trucks is not a problem at all, and for dumpsters and for trash trucks. In addition, one of the council people, and I'm sorry I didn't catch the name, brought up the fact that the second floor drawing is a blank slate. There's no delineation of facilities. So in the limit, this applicant could run a sports bar on the second floor with very minimal food. And as an example of that was the operation that was done at the former Park East, where they had 2 different parts of the restaurant. Front area, you could get a really fine meal. In the back area, you had a sports bar, and you could get a buffet at times or very minimal food at the bar. And the side effect of that was a huge parking need with a sports bar operation. So this council is approving something without any knowledge of what's going to happen on the second floor. And that is really a step back from the past. I shared with the council multiple examples of previous liquor license where the applicant had to define the seating arrangements, the number of tables, where the liquor is going to be stored. I have others. I didn't bother to send you a half dozen, but this is really, really a step back in terms of quality. In addition, that's all I have on that resolution. Resolution 2/17/21, I'm sorry, for the ABC letter regarding the distillery at 7 Main. In light of the fact that distillery is a manufacturing operation as defined by ABC, and manufacturing is not allowed in the general commercial district. In addition, this is not a specific allowed function in the general commercial district. It's not a listed business for that general commercial district. Is the borough going to share that information with the ABC? And are they going to do it in time for the shut off of comments, which is all the comments have to be in by the 4th of this month? So what are the plans relative to this distillery? And my understanding is if I go on the internet, there's already all kinds of documentation about this building and its location, etc. And it hasn't been before the planning board. So what's going on? Thank you.
Mr. Delaney, that applicant and prior to doing any type of construction did go through the zoning process, correct? And if the passed through zoning, would it need to go to planning board?
It did go through zoning. The details of I am not, don't have at my fingertips.
But it went through all the inspections, which it wouldn't have moved on to if it hadn't gone through zoning, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
I'll share with you. We've had a problem with zoning
Did it
quality.
obtain the CO? Has it gotten a CO yet?
CO. Yes. That was the final step that was needed prior for the final step of the ABC.
How could it go through zoning when it's not allowed use in the GCD?
Well, I think our zoning officer disagrees with you, Mr. Lane.
Well, it's not in alignment with the other decisions that have been made in the relative to zoning. It's not a listed use, and it's manufacturing. And if you remember when Dubleski wanted to put the ice cream manufacturing in the general commercial district, it had to go through the zoning operation. This is the same zoning officer that approved the reconstruction of a building in the special flood hazard area without any consideration of the fact that it was in a special flood hazard area. And I don't see how in the world, and I spent a lot of time working on the zoning ordinance, that this doesn't require planning board approval.
Mr. Delaney, can you look into that? Okay, thank you. Anyone else on the phone lines have any further commentary? Anyone else that's joined us video since, if you want to raise your hand if you wish to speak on items on the consent agenda or communications. Okay, going once, going twice. Can I please have a motion to close the public?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. For mayor's updates, I'm going to pass on those this evening just because we have 2 discussions coming forward and I want to be able to allocate time for the public for those topics. So I'm going to move to the consent agenda. As noted earlier, R 7821 is being tabled to the March 16th, 2021 council meeting. I do encourage everyone to log on next Tuesday evening at 7 p.m. for a special council meeting for discussion and presentation of the status of the complete streets. And when someone motions for the approval of the items on the consent agenda, per earlier discussion, if you can include in your motion that our 8021 will have a whereas added to include 6-10 into the address.
Also, it will attach a copy of the county's Board of Health recommendation.
Great. So I would need a motion for that, please.
I'll move to approve the consent agenda, modifying the let me see, which one are we? 80-21 to include the attachment of the Board of Health letter and to modify the address to include 6-10 West Front Street.
Second,
Yeah, please have a roll call, Michelle.
now that Matt did all the hard work.
Councilmember Good,
Yes.
Councilmember Pacheco,
Yes.
Councilmember Fotopoulos, Councilmember Fotopoulos.
I pushed the space bar, it didn't work. Yes.
Thank you. Councilmember McDermott,
Yes.
Councilmember Davidson,
Yes.
Councilmember McNamara.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have the public hearing adoption of ordinance 1-21, amending and supplementing the borough's stormwater management and control ordinance. Michelle, would you please?
It's ordinance number 1-21. It's an ordinance of the Borough of Keyport, County of Monmouth, New Jersey, amending and supplementing Chapter 24 of the revised general ordinances of the Borough of Keyport governing the borough's stormwater management and control.
Thank you. Can I please have a motion to open to the public?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you. Members of the public that wish to comment on this public hearing on this ordinance adoption, if you're on video, please raise your hand. Sorry, just going through the different rows. Can we go to the phone lines, please? Anyone on the phone line, if you would like to speak, please hit *6 on your phone. Okay,
Motion
going
closed.
once. Going twice. Can I have a motion to close the public hearing for the adoption of the ordinance 1-21?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Can I please have a motion to adopt ordinance 1-21?
Motion.
Second.
Michelle?
Councilmember Good,
Yes.
Councilmember Pacheco,
Yes.
Councilmember Fotopoulos,
Yes.
Councilmember McDermott,
Yes.
Councilmember Davidson,
Yes.
and Councilmember McNamara.
Yes.
Thank you.
I just have
Thank
one
you.
question. When we publish this, I think we've gotten feedback from Mr. Lane. Will it be the revised version and not the striked?
I'm sorry.
When we publish it? When we
In
list
the paper, you mean, or when
on
we?
the website, like when it's finally done, gone through everything?
I think it will always have the striked so that they can do it without the strike, Jay.
I didn't think we could.
The ordinance will include the strikeouts.
Right.
As part of the codification, the strikeouts will be removed. So we're
Okay.
the revised
It'll have-
provisions.
And it'll have the revised date on the codification part, right?
Thank you. Just want to make sure we're doing that.
Okay. Can I have a motion authorizing the clerk to publish an ordinance as adopted?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? Okay. Next, we have communications by consent, items number 1 through 4, and items 5 and 6 to receive and file. Do we have any commentary by council members?
Mayor, one thing I just want to note for the record with regard to the ordinance that we did receive a letter from the planning board that it complied with our master plan, just so we cross the T's and dot the I's on that one.
Thank you. Any commentary by council members for items 1 through 6 in communications? Okay, can I please have a motion to approve items 1 through 4 for approval and 5 and 6 to receive and file?
Motion with the approval of the waiver of the application fee for the Keyport First Aid.
Still.
Second.
Second.
May I please have a roll call?
I think the puppy voted earlier.
Councilmember Good.
Mr.
There you go.
Mr. Graham, can you please keep your phone muted? Thank you. We love Peaches, but we need to do
Peaches
the
is
roll
in
call.
favor of everything.
Councilmember Good.
Yes.
Councilmember Pacheco.
Yes.
Councilmember Fotopoulos.
Yes.
Councilmember McDermott.
Yes.
Councilmember Davidson.
Yes.
And Councilmember McNamara.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have minutes for approval, February 2nd, 2021, and February 16th, 2021. Can I please have a motion to approve?
Motion.
Motion.
Second.
Can I please have a roll call, Michelle?
Councilmember Good.
Yeah.
Councilmember Pacheco.
I abstained from February 2nd and yes to February 16th.
Councilmember Fotopoulos.
Yes.
Councilmember McDermott.
Yes.
Councilmember Davidson.
Yes.
And Councilmember McNamara.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, under new business, I'm going to be deferring this to Michelle and Jay for discussion, but some background of it is each municipality kind of does it different for the process of bingo and raffle license approvals. Some have them come to the whole governing body, but that does often slow the process down for a lot of the nonprofits that hold these type of raffles. And then if they have to wait 2 weeks, or when the months that we have one meeting in a month, they're not able to get the approval, and then either they have to stop doing it or they don't do it properly. So I will defer it over to Jay to say what they would like to potentially discuss and maybe move forward at another meeting. I muted myself so they can't hear you. So you can start over, sorry.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. As you indicated, the rules of the legalized games of chance that cover bingo and raffle processes for license approval authorize the governing body to designate an official, typically the municipal clerk, to approve these licenses. That does eliminate the oftentimes time sensitivity of the application process. I would also suggest that our ordinance be amended to include a provision that would provide for a waiver of the municipal fee for our local fire company and first aid, further eliminating the need for the application process to include formal approval by the governing body at a public meeting. That ordinance could include a provision that the clerk provide a report at each meeting on any applications that have been approved. It's really just a way of cleaning up the process, and as you've indicated, eliminating the need for the nonprofits that conduct these bingos and raffles to have the applications in sometimes 30 days more than what would otherwise be required.
So in summary, are you suggesting that the waiver of fees is for first aid and fire, automatic, right?
For keyboard based.
Keyport first aid and fire, correct. Any other person or entity requesting a waiver fee would come to the governing body for approval. But I know, Michelle, we had also discussed that sometimes seeing these things on our agenda is kind of a checkpoint for us to kind of know what's going on in town, or maybe something we want to participate in or support. So if we moved forward with that, obviously it would be an ordinance update anyway, but would we be able to keep a list and maybe put it in with the reporting on what ones have been approved, that you approve them?
Certainly.
Is that, Jay?
That seems to make sense. I think that satisfies your concern about knowing the bingo and raffle applications that are, being conducted within the community.
Okay.
Can you, I'm
Council
sorry,
members,
repeat that? I apologize. Mayor, I think that's a good idea. I just want to make sure. What was it that you wanted to do? You wanted it to come before the council post approval, right?
Yes, in the
So we
form
would
of a
know.
report.
So we would, not only would we know, but we could also comment if we needed to post approval.
right, and that automatically potentially built into the ordinance update would be that fire and first aid waiver of application fees would be waived indefinitely.
That I got. Yeah, that I've heard before. I've always.
Okay. I wasn't sure if you heard that part. I'll open it to other council members for commentary.
I do know that some of our churches do bingos and events, so we have not historically given them waivers. So they would have to go to council if we do want to do a waiver, if I'm clear understanding the protocol.
The suggestion currently would be for anyone other than fire or first aid that's requesting a fee waiver, that they would have to come before the governing body.
It is also my understanding that those fees have not been waived for organizations other than fire and first aid.
They were starting to creep in there, but.
And just so the governing body's aware, the fee process is actually, there's a state fee and a municipal. So the municipal fee is what's been waived, but the organizations would still have to pay the required state fee.
And we're the collectors of the state fee.
That's correct.
Would groups that aren't asking for waiver, would they still come to us? No, right? I assume at that point.
Correct.
Okay.
And that would allow the clerk's office, administration office to just streamline the process a little bit in a smoother way instead of people having to wait for.
I was going to suggest that if the answer was different, so thank you.
Cool. Councilman Good?
Oh, I think it's a good idea.
Councilwoman Davidson?
No noise.
We didn't hear you, Laura.
I think it's a good idea. Thank you.
Okay, great. Councilwoman McNamara?
I also think it's a good idea.
Great. So then can we defer for our ordinance introduction change for the next meeting?
Next week.
Great, thank you. Okay, next we have the unfinished business where we have requested for the topic of legalization of recreational marijuana. Ms. London had circulated some information to the council members of where things were at the state level. I think things have probably even changed since then. They seem to be changing about every 27 seconds. Do you want to provide a general summary, and then
Yes.
we can open it up for a roundtable conversation with the public?
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Since our last discussion, the legislation has been signed by the governor. Actually, it was signed on February 22nd. And the legislature had sent him another bill to clean up the language that he had asked for that was holding up him signing the bill to deal with penalties for those under 21 who were caught possessing cannabis. So that the bill is now done. There was a clarification that I made to the summary as a result of the comment that was made by, or a question that was raised by Councilmember Fotopoulos at the last meeting about how the 180 days applies to the municipality. And it does apply to take any action as opposed to just prohibiting cannabis business. So the council has to take action within 180 days from the signing of the bill, which brings us to August, I have it in the bill, August 21st.
It's 21st.
To take action. If you fail to take any action, then it will be an automatic approval to have these businesses be allowed in the municipality based on the state regulations. So you definitely want to take action either way to control the process. What the summary also did was to just raise questions for your consideration. The first one, of course, being whether or not you want to have any of the cannabis businesses in the municipality. Attached to the summary was a listing of the 6 types of licenses that are out there and can be considered by the municipality if you choose to do so. And also the summary does point out that you can impose a tax, so to speak, so you can raise some revenues for the various businesses. So the first question, or the actions to be taken initially, is the discussion whether or not you want to do an outright prohibition of all cannabis businesses in the municipality, or have some businesses allowed, and then where, and all the other regulatory issues that are involved with it. There is Council President Good had provided a form of ordinance as a good start, and I believe the League of Municipalities will be issuing guidance documents and information this week. I think actually tomorrow they have a roundtable discussion taking place that I signed up for also to provide more information. But in the next couple of weeks, you will see a lot of information coming out trying to help municipalities in this regard. So with that said, I'll turn it back to you, Mayor, for discussion.
Thank you. And just for the members of the public that are on the phone or on video, can you just go through the 6 classifications again, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
There's Class 1 cannabis cultivation license. It means any licensed person or entity that grows, cultivates, or produces cannabis in the state and sells and may transport cannabis to other cannabis cultivators or usable cannabis to cannabis manufacturers, wholesalers, retailers, but not to customers or consumers, excuse me. Then there's a Class 2 cannabis manufacturer's license. It means a licensed person or entity that processes cannabis items in the state by purchasing or otherwise obtaining usable cannabis, manufacturing, preparing, and packaging cannabis items, and selling, and optionally transporting these items to other manufacturers, wholesalers, retailers, but again, not to consumers. The third class of licenses is the wholesaler license. And that involves an entity or licensed person that purchases or otherwise obtains, stores, sells, or otherwise transfers or may transfer cannabis items for the purpose of resale or other transfer to another cannabis wholesaler, retailer, and again, but not to consumers. The cannabis distributor license is class 4, and that's an entity that transports cannabis in bulk intrastate from one licensed cannabis cultivator to another cultivator, or transports items in bulk intrastate from one class of licensed establishments to another class, and may engage in temporary storage of cannabis or cannabis items as necessary to carry out the transportation activities. The one that may be the most popular is the class 5 retailer license, and that's a person or entity that purchases or otherwise obtains usable cannabis from cultivators and cannabis items from cannabis manufacturers or wholesalers. And these are the ones that sell to consumers from a retail store and may use a cannabis delivery service or a certified cannabis handler for off-premises delivery of cannabis items and related supplies to consumers. So the retailer license is the one that has the direct relationship with the public. And then you have your class 6 delivery license. And that is the person or entity that provides the courier services for consumer purchases of cannabis items and related supplies fulfilled by a cannabis retailer in order to make deliveries of the items and supplies to that consumer, and which includes services that have the ability of a consumer to purchase the cannabis items directly through the cannabis delivery service. And I believe the state will have most of the power regarding the delivery license area. So I think you will find most interest probably in the retailer license. And also, if someone is interested in growing, that's the cultivation license, or wants to manufacture, the manufacturer's license. So you have the ability to regulate all or some of those areas, or none if you choose to have no businesses in the borough.
Great. Thank you, Ms. London.
And you could also control how many licenses you will be giving out or approving.
Okay. There's not a maximum. Okay.
Well, the state will control that from their end, because there are only certain licenses are going to be capped, and then certain areas will have priority over others in getting those licenses. So the individual or entity interested has to apply to the state in addition to dealing with your local regulations.
Thank you. What I'd like to do is, because I think for anything in the borough to move forward, I think it's important to have public input on this, being that we do have, I tried to do a quick count before, about 13 members of the public. Might be less now. It looks like some people have logged off. Kind of have like a 2 to 3 minute limit per person. And if we don't hit an extended time, length of time, then if someone wants to speak again, that they can. That way it gives the public to indicate what their wish list would be or non-wish list would be. So can I please have a motion to open to the public?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. So we'll do, as we've been doing, show of hands. First, Mr. Kelsey.
Hi, Andrew Kelsey, 29 St. Peter's Place. The deadline of July 1st seems to be pretty short on this. So especially if things are in continuous flux with the state as what their rules are going to be, perhaps, if possible, you consider passing a prohibition to buy yourself more time to have more opportunity to get the details right going forward. That's all. That's my suggestion. Thank you.
And actually, the date is August 21st.
August
not
21st. I'm sorry.
And Leslie, correct me if I'm wrong, but if we don't do something within that 180 days, we can't do anything for another 5 years. Is that still part of the law?
If you take no action, correct. And what
But if you take Mr. Kelsey's idea and say no now, can we change
have to
it?
wait.
Then not have to wait 5 years?
Yes, actually that question came up today in another context, that you have at least acted within the 180 days, so you can amend and change your mind. But it's important to take some action within the 180 days.
Okay, thank you. Good point, Mr. Kelsey. Anyone else on the video? Raise your hand. You want to speak on this? Mr. Maroney?
Yeah, thank you. Patrick Maroney, 313 Main Street. Good evening, Mayor and members of council. My take on this is that I'm open to the idea of cannabis business operating here. When we're in a time of economic contraction with empty storefronts and reduced tourism, I don't see how prohibiting businesses for this new industry is best for our borough. Cannabis businesses may very well bring new people to the town that could stay or come back and shop or eat at the restaurants. New economic activity is good. And as was mentioned, we can collect local taxes as well. I would expect that any prohibition of these 6 classes of businesses be justified by data and research, and not, anecdotal evidence or personal opinions about the type of people that the businesses would bring to town. And that's my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Maroney. Anyone else? Oh, I'm sorry.
Hi,
I don't want to assume. Is that Mrs. Maroney?
Sure. Jennifer Bellis, 313 Main Street.
Sorry.
I just want to say that I also agree that I'll be paying attention to this topic. And if, we do decide to ban any of these classes, I will also be expecting to hear data and reasoning to back up these decisions. And I really, truly hope that they are not based in fear or prejudice. And I will be holding you all accountable to that reasoning. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Schaub? Mr. Schaub?
Jack's like a discombobulated hand.
There was a hand up on the screen. Mr. Straub, are you trying to speak?
We can't hear you, Jack.
Yes,
Oh,
I'm
there you
sorry.
go.
I thought I was
There you
unmuted. I'm sorry.
No problem.
Has the borough, Jack Straub, 239 Main Street. Has the borough council, among yourselves, had preliminary discussions? Is there any kind of a consensus as to what your thoughts are? You strictly waiting for what you hear back from the public?
At the last meeting, prior meeting in January, we had asked Ms. London to provide a summary of where things were going to be going forward potentially after the referendum passed and where the deadlines were going to be coming. At that point, only general information was known. So she circulated a brief summary and we discussed it at the last meeting briefly, but before we even tried to even form a committee or look at different legislation pieces for the municipality, we felt it was important that we had public input.
Okay, so I guess what I was asking is, is the council itself leaning one way or another, or you're just at this point gathering information?
Right now, it's gathering information.
Okay. My personal opinion would be, since it is legal in the state, I would hope that you would follow guidelines similar to alcohol. I think whatever state regulations are in effect, I wouldn't be afraid of it. I'd certainly take a look at it and try to, place locations in the proper place. But I would hope that it would be welcomed as a business opportunity, and you would follow regulations as you do with serving alcoholic beverages.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other members of the public on video wish to speak? This is some great discussion. Thanks, everyone. Anyone on the phone lines wish to discuss on this topic? Please hit *6 on your phone to unmute yourself.
John Merla, 34 Broad Street, Keyport.
Hi, Mr. Marlowe.
Hello, Mayor. Mixed emotions. I've heard some members of the public speak about new taxes and new businesses and comparing alcohol to marijuana. I strongly urge the council and yourself, Mayor, get the opinions of our police department also. Let them be heard, because obviously they're heard when there's alcohol, when there's renewals for licenses, when there's marks against liquor license. So if we're going to compare liquor to the sale of marijuana within our municipality, I think it should be also looked upon as we do with alcohol. Enough footage away from if you decide that way, from a school, from a recreational facility, from daycares. I don't believe there's many stores empty in town. Matter of fact, I believe 3, because one was rented today. So that doesn't, plus they're paying taxes already, whether they're rented or not. The thing, it's got to be discussed amongst the council members to weigh out the pros and the cons. And if the pros outweigh the cons, then I say, you know what, you're going to have to give it a shot. But if the cons weigh out the pros, I think you should give it a stronger look as we look to the future of our municipality, how we're going to shape it up. And I know there's medical marijuana being sold now in our community at a shop on West Front and Broadway. So I don't know what guidelines they have to follow, if there's any, and if there's not, then there's not. But I think the police department should at least be involved with the borough's decision. And that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Mr. Marla, is the place on Broad and West Front selling CBD products or medical marijuana?
I'm not sure. There's a sign in the front window.
I think it's CBD. I think.
It may be.
It's a great question for us to defer to the chief. So, but thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, I'm sorry to interrupt. That sign that Mr. Merle is referring to has confused a lot of people. They actually sell products in support of medical marijuana. They do not sell medical marijuana. So they sell deliver, the consumption methods, so to speak.
Banner's misleading then a little bit.
Definitely is, man. Definitely is, John. I agree.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Any other members of the public on the phone lines wish to speak? Please hit *6.
Mike Lane.
Hi, Mr. Lane.
I want to build on some of the input from the Mayor Merla and from Jack Straub. We have a set of regulations for alcohol that delineate, how close alcohol business can be to church and schools, etc., and hours of operation, number of licenses. And I would assume all those things should, that type of criteria should apply to medical marijuana or to marijuana. In addition, I think it's important to recognize what the borough attorney had pointed out, is that you can't have marijuana distribution, retail, in any kind of a store that has food. It can't be located on a premise with a grocery store, a delicatessen, indoor food market, or other stores engaged in retail sales of food, or in any premise with a store that engages in alcohol, bars. So it's very limited. It almost has to be a marijuana store in terms of the retail function that can take place. Interesting, I lived in 2 areas where marijuana was legal in my lifetime, or illegal and used. And also I have a number of people that I sailed with that are now living in California, and they briefed me on a whole set of things to be dealt with in the borough. One example is in bars, there's limits on the noise level. Well, in marijuana, there has to be limits on the odor. I had the experience of touring Europe right after the Iron Curtain was removed. And in Amsterdam, for the marijuana bars, you could not let the air out onto the street. So you went into the bar, and then there was a vestibule, and then you went into a second area completely sealed off because the smell of marijuana is so strong. Same thing was true in Boulder, Colorado. The University of Colorado, back in the early 1960s, marijuana was so prevalent that if you got within a block of the campus, you could smell it. So one of the things the borough has to deal with is, where can marijuana be smoked? Are you going to smoke it on the promenade? Can you smoke it outside in a gated area by a marijuana store? And the odor, I think, I know, passing a car on the road, somebody smoking marijuana, you can smell it. Walking down the beach at Sandy Hook, you can certainly smell it. So there's that kind of an issue to protect the other residents in town, the odor issue. And then the borough will have to create, just like you have a licensing capability for alcohol, and you are the committee that approves applications, you're going to have to set something up similar to that for the marijuana licensing in town. Those are some thoughts off the top of my head. My strongest input is that just like you had special meetings, and you're going to have a special meeting for complete streets, and you had special meeting for the redevelopment, you really ought to consider having a special meeting on marijuana. And we need to get out the borough attorney's information regarding the licensing, the fact that there's 6 levels of licensing, everything from growing to distribution. How many marijuana plants are you going to be able to grow in your house or your backyard? And so those issues have to be dealt with. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lane. Any other members of the public wish to comment on this topic? Mr. Graham, I see your hand up. If you can unmute yourself, please.
Okay,
Yep.
can you hear? All right. Elmer J. Graham Jr., 22 St. Peter's Place. As far as the topic of legalized marijuana goes, I definitely agree with all what's been said so far tonight. You know, you have to treat it like the same as alcohol and stuff like that, you know, and just monitor it very carefully and stuff and everything like that. But I agree with all what has been said tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Graham. Yeah, I think this is great dialogue. Can I please have a motion to close to the public?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Council members, would anyone wish to comment on this topic? Mr. Good? Sorry, Councilor Good.
Thank you, Mayor. You know what? I'll weigh in. I think of the whole thing, and because Leslie just said a good start, which I won't take too much of offense to the term, but you know, I'll let it slide. But my thoughts are a lot along the lines of what everybody else has kind of said here. I think that I don't see any reason to outright ban it. My thoughts are that if it's going to be, you know, retail, that probably keep it in the highway commercial district. The other wholesale manufacturing cultivation, I think that if it's in our industrial district, not the light industrial, but the industrial part, I think that's going to be sufficiently away from our residential areas. So that would be my thought. In terms of the regulations, yeah, it's going to be, you know, definitely regulated. I would not be in favor of setting up any kind of consumption area, either on in the public promenade, or really even attached to the store, the storefronts. Obviously, the bulk standards of what the premises would have to be would comply with the state guidelines, but I can't see it being, you know, more, you know, less than 500 feet from school, church, daycare, those kind of things. I think the state's actually I keep those away. In terms of, I think Mr. Lane's minimizing odor, I think the minimizing is to 0. I've seen a couple of ordinances from around, I guess, the nation where this is legal, and you know, a lot of it says 0 odor. Obviously, the licensing from the municipal part needs to be vetted through our police. I think there's also been, I've seen limitations on advertising. So really, you can't even, you know, it's one of those where you know it is the place, but there are no billboards, no flashing signs, anything like that. There was a limitation on advertising, which, you know, I don't have a problem with. Of course, I do enjoy the fact that we can get the 2% and 1% fee, and then, you know, whatever charge for the licensing would be also set up. I don't think that there are, I guess those are my comments. I had a lot more in my little draft that I had, but at least, you know, I think that gives us, or at least my thoughts on this going forward.
Great. Thank you. Councilwoman Pacheco?
Yeah, I'm just gonna echo what Matt said. In the draft too, there was some sort of language about like filtration systems and stuff like that. I'm sure that that's more standard than we think. So, yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that was said today. And I think we can figure out a way to do this safely. We can loop in all the parties, police, whomever else needs to be looped in. That's all.
Thank you. Councilman Fotopoulos?
Thank you, Meredith. This is with respect to everybody's comments, including Patrick's and Jennifer's tonight. All good comments, and you know, I would caution, you know, as far as evidence and everything is concerned, I completely agree with Patrick and Jennifer. There is valid anecdotal and experience evidence that can be applied to some of this too, and quite simply, it's, you know, the desires of the rest of the public. And I am 100% for. I guess I shouldn't put a number to it, but I'm totally for, you know, voting to allow it here in the borough within the 180 days. I'm not inclined to vote. I'm not inclined to prohibit it first and then look to allow it, because I fear we might run out the clock somehow if we do it that way. But I think that, one thing we can do is have a fair amount of discussion as to where it's going to go. I support what Councilman Good and Councilwoman Pacheco mentioned with regards to locating the facilities. I also don't know if we should limit the classes. I think we should, if we're going to do this, we should be smart about it, or be vigilant about it. Let me just say vigilant, and look to find a path to yes for any and all of the classes that we can allow in the borough. And that includes grow facilities and whatnot. The one question I have is the state, Ms. London, going to regulate personal? I was under the understanding that the state was going to allow, limit the number of plants people can have on their personal property, or they can grow. Is that something we're going to have to regulate? I mean, can't they just put it in their garden?
I had heard that.
I don't think they can.
I don't know.
I will. I'm sorry.
I just want to hear from, if you don't mind, Vicky, I want to hear from you.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
Yeah, I'll probably have more information tomorrow after I go to this round table on it. There's so many issues that are still open. The bill itself was, 200 some odd pages. Yep. Of reading, and now trying to put all this into a forms of regulations, but everyone's moving very quickly on it because it has been an issue for so long. So I think there'll be a significant comprehensive Q&A coming out of the League of Municipalities to address a lot of the issues. And I think that will be coming very soon.
So while we're waiting,
can I just ask Mr. Graham to please mute his phone again?
Oh, Elmer.
Thank you.
So while we are waiting for that, we can, probably not tonight, but we can vote within the next few meetings or so, I hope, to vote on it and see where it falls as far as whether or not we're going to allow it, and then go from there. Thank you, Mayor, for allowing me the time.
Councilwoman McDermott.
First question, I think what I would need is a list of what is considered industrial areas in the zone for growing or cultivating. One of the concerns is living in an area that might be flagged for this. I do want to make sure that my neighborhood and all that stuff is safe. So I think that would be important for the entire board to have regarding where this could potentially be zoned for. And when I say this, I want a very clear definition of where this area, not just West Front Street. I want a clear definition of this. The other thing would be retail wise, again, we already have some ordinances that follow the alcohol protocol. That's fine. The other pieces of this, other pieces of this are a bit, something that we probably need to investigate further. I am actually in for the district, if we are going to do this, put this on the highway area, similar to what Councilman Good said. I just think we definitely need to make sure visually we know where this is going to impact our neighborhood. And I don't think public consumption should be occurring anywhere. Just out of support to our police department that we actually have to enforce this, because this is going to also be an intensive labor force on them, in addition to alcohol consumption, which they already do. And again, in our public parks and areas, smoking is illegal, as this would be illegal as well, given our ordinances. The other thing would be, we also need to just have a balance between, I do like the fact that we can have 2% additional licensing tax on this consumable. So that would be a good revenue piece for us. But I do think we have to have a conservative side to this before we say yes to everything. I think we have to be very conscious and very tuned with what we're doing with our towns, because we do have a housing, everyone wants to live in Keyport, right? We want to make sure our space and our properties are also able to build and develop, and how housing stays intact as well. It's not just built and knocked down for distribution or whatever it may be. So that's all I want to do. That's it.
Thank you. Councilwoman Davidson? Oops.
A couple of questions. Ms. London, do you know if there was any clarification or if it's changed the legislation where the parents would not be notified if minors are caught with marijuana in any way? I don't know if what I heard was true or not. Can you clarify that point of the legislation?
I can find out the answer. I don't know it offhand.
And once you find it out, is there going to be a way that if that is in fact true, that the parents of minors will not be contacted if they're caught with marijuana, if the borough can put something in that kind of overrides that? I don't know if that's possible or not.
Because I know the second bill that came to clean up the minor issue, it does involve giving the minors warnings. And it seems like it's kind of inferred that the parents would be notified or at some point, because at least after the second or third warning, I think the warning goes to the parents. So I would infer that there's probably some notification when you give the warning to the minor, that the parent is notified also, but I can clarify that and confirm it.
Thank you. This is, I guess, a conversation for the rest of the council as well. Before we proceed one way or the other, would it be beneficial to gather data from other states and small towns that have been legalized already, been running, how it's working in their communities and neighborhoods, and the fallout or the pros and cons of it? Would it be beneficial to bring in some of that data to analyze before we make our decision? Let's see what else. Sorry, I'm trying to read my handwriting here. I'm sure there was something else and I can't find where I left it. Give me 1 second here. Oh, I would actually encourage a special meeting before we make our final decision with the public as a hearing for them. I think there's some people here, but I think there are a lot of public that would like to, they have more to say. I've heard pros and cons all over town. So I think that would be beneficial. And maybe if we have more information, more ideas of the districts, we would put it in where we feel firmly we can lay that out to them to give them a comfort level and see the feedback from there, and then go back and tweak what we're thinking about before we make our final decision.
So if anything were to move forward, my understanding is we would have to do this as an ordinance introduction and wait, let me say that again. Ordinance adoption, which would require an introduction and a public hearing. Am I correct, Ms. London?
Are you saying, is the question, can you have a special meeting?
No, for us to move forward, it would be ordinance based, right? Which would
if you are
therefore have a public hearing, correct?
Yes, if you're going to specific action, and that would be by ordinance.
Okay, so by default, we can advertise it better, or we could choose just to have that ordinance hearing as a special meeting. But by default, there will be more public input, is my point, correct, Ms. London?
Yes.
If we move forward with something.
Correct.
Unless we prohibit everything, which I'm gathering is not from the discussion tonight. Okay, so does that help, Ms. Davidson, with Councilwoman Davidson? Okay.
One last question. Ms. London, do you know the application process for the commission for anybody applying for the licenses? Is it going to be just as stringent as what an applicant would go through for the ABC? Do you happen to know what their process is going to be for approving or denying it prior to us getting it?
Now, that will be part of the regulations that are coming out. The legislation did indicate certain parts of the license process that would be involved, but it will be more specifically outlined as part of the regulations.
Thank you.
And you will have the opportunity to respond and give your input for an applicant that has applied to the state. They will be looking to the borough for its input on any application that comes from your borough.
I do agree that it should be in the highway district as well. I don't believe that it should be in our small town, West Front Street, Broad Street, Broadway at this point in time. So, and definitely no consumption on the streets, just like alcohol. So my thoughts and opinions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilwoman McNamara.
Okay, bear with me because I have notes all over the place. I've been doing some of the things that we've all talked about. I've been trying to do some research out of state and things like that. But point number one, I am a fan of even away from just public hearings when we have an ordinance on an agenda to set up some community meetings for outreach and opinion. I really think it should be that broad-based. We all know a lot of our public does not look at our minutes. They do not come to these meetings. So I think it's a real topical item and it should be out there. I think we need general community, which is going to be parents and seniors and people who might live nearby. I think it should be our first responders, you know, first aid, police, they should all be involved. We definitely should adhere to zoning concerns, but that's all a little bit further down the way. I think that first, you know, we want to go step by step and look at the different classes and figure out, are there any that initially we might want to just put a hold on? And the only reason I bring that up is I think one of the things that Mr. Kelsey brought up is a valid point. If we're not sure how something's going to play out and we don't want to run the risk of that 180-day clock ticking out on us and us not being able to act for 5 years because we didn't get to something, I think it's okay to put a pause on something. And it might be by temporarily banning something until we can get more information, although Council Member Fotopoulos, you know, suggested kind of the opposite. My concern with that is, can we protect ourselves through the wording of an ordinance if we pass everything as okay to put limitations? Like, we're saying it's okay to do this in our town, but there's going to be all of this other stuff that has to happen, you know, adherence to zoning and things like that. So I think we just have to be really mindful. We want to spell it out. I think we have to be moving with this quickly. 180 days is a short amount of time. Let's see. And again, Ms. London, as far as you know, if we say no to something initially, that's the easier way for us to be able to then reverse ourselves, right? If we do nothing, we expose ourselves.
Exactly.
Okay. So again, I guess my main things would be to have some more public advisory or committees prior to any kind of a public meeting to get a better comfort level. I do agree that we should have some stuff posted. We should get some conversations going. And I guess that's pretty much it. I'm not really that as particular as other people about being in town with these facilities. I've been to other states and seen how they operate their business, and I guess that's given me a comfort level. Some states decide to do things in standalone facilities. Some have other restrictions. But I think that one of the things Councilmember Davidson brought up about doing our homework of how things have played out in other states is really important. We don't need to reinvent the wheel, but we should do our homework, and we should get feedback from communities that have gone down this path. And, you know, we don't have to make the same mistakes, and we can learn from other people. So that's it from me.
Thank you. Councilman Fotopoulos?
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to, make sure once again, we understand the process, because what Councilwoman McNamara just brought up confused me again. We don't need to vote now on the classes, do we?
When you say within the 180 days?
Yes, within the 180 days. Do we need to approve the classes, or do we just need to approve, we just need to say we are going to allow, and then we can decide what classes?
No, you have to be more detailed than that. But what you can do, you can start off small if you want to, saying you'll allow A, B, and C, and then at some point expand it to include other things if you're not certain about the other things at the same time. So in a sense, you're only approving A, B, and C. So anything else is not approved. But there's nothing to say that you can't go back and amend the ordinance at some point to include other classes if you want those included.
So if we approve retail and that's it for the initially, because we need more time to discuss the others, then we can approve, we can do what Mr. Kelsey said. We can say we're essentially not acting or saying no to the others, and we are specifically approving retail only.
Right,
No.
you're saying only in Keyport you're going to allow retail. That's it. Nothing else is going to be approved.
And then we can turn around and we can approve it in the future once we get our bearings.
Correct.
Understood.
Okay. By approving maybe one, we don't have to wait the 5 year to change something, right?
Right. That's
my question too.
Okay.
Right. The 5 years only comes in if you do nothing.
Right.
Got it. Thank you.
So Ms. London, again, now everything I've read now, I'm confused again, because I thought we had to address each of the 6, either yay or nay.
And essentially, you're doing that if you're saying only you're allowing A, and you say, and that's it. Essentially, if that's what you're saying, B, C, and D is not allowed because you didn't say that they were allowed.
Okay, you don't
But
need,
we don't have a 5 year block.
you don't need to specifically say to each class yay or nay. I just don't want us to not say nay and then get caught where we can't do it. 5 years on part of it.
You're not going. The 5 year bar only comes in if you fail to act at all. So if you do an ordinance right now that says you're only going to allow retail, that's it. The ordinance should be that nothing else is allowed, to do the ordinance properly, that only retail is allowed, no other classes of license are allowed. And then at some point, if you decide you want to expand and have other licenses, then you would amend your ordinance to do that.
But again, we are specifically then saying we're not allowing the other ones in that ordinance.
Correct. You're saying you're only allowing retail.
Right. What we're allowing and what we're not allowing.
Correct.
Okay.
But in an ordinance, if you're not allowing something, whatever, just because we may not have enough facts yet, maybe we want to have more evidence based, like some of the people mentioned tonight, right? So maybe we want to see how this goes throughout the rest of the state and have evidence and maybe wait on some of the classifications. So if we do say yes to 1, 2, or 3 classifications, by us adopting an ordinance, it doesn't block us into a 5 year wait of having to change anything. So if we say by August 20th, Notice I didn't say April 20th for 4/20. So by August 20th, we say we're going to do A and B. I'm not even going to use the numbers that are listed here because I don't want to cause confusion. So we're going to do A and B. And then in 6 months' time, by the end of the year, we see how it's going for other municipalities. We can add in all the rest if we wanted to. We're not on a 5-year block. Whereas if we say no to, if we do nothing, for us to amend it would be a 5-year wait to flip it, correct?
Right, if you do nothing, you run the risk of that 5-year ban.
Okay. Okay. Well, I think this was very good dialogue. Councilman Good, do you maybe want to circulate the draft that you were working on with the governing body and see if you want to make any tweaks to that and send that back out to Ms. London and the governing body for feedback? And I mean, that's not formal or anything like that, but, or do you just want to have someone else work with you on a committee?
No, that's fine. I mean, as long as Leslie doesn't think it's too much of a start.
Actually, I thought it was a very good start, Councilman.
You could circulate it, but it's still just going to be continued conversation for unfinished business at the next meeting.
Yes.
I just have a quick question. What does it cover, like just the retail side, or is it covering all of this just generally?
Are you asking about my draft? The draft?
Yes.
I put in there that essentially what I laid out before. I didn't have any issues with the 5 classes that are placed, because I think the delivery one is, I don't even know, that one confuses me, but setting up their bulk standards, setting up the zones that it's allowed, the advertising permit process, I thought it was pretty, it covered a lot of stuff. All of what we've discussed, I did have it included in there, so you'll get a bunch of reading if you want.
And this is just for clarification for the public. This is just trying to get something going, and then maybe we'll form, a council committee soon down the road. But this is just a jumping piece. We are not ready to adopt any type of ordinance by the next meeting. This is just
discussion
dialogue
only.
and discussion only amongst council members, but not amongst each other, so we don't cause a quorum. Okay, I think this was great and helpful. Thank everyone for your patience and for your great dialogue. Next, we will go into attorney's report. Ms. Lamoni, let me just change the view on my screen. I'm hoping you're still here. Yes, okay, great. Ms. London, I'm going to defer to you for the 5G update. And then I'll have to have a motion and approval from the governing body to bring in Mr. Money to the conversation. But I'll let Ms. London go first, please.
Yes, I put together a 2-page document. I don't know if it was received in time to be distributed, just to kind of go over in general. So some of the information may seem pretty basic, but I wanted to make sure that everyone had a good understanding of 5G and the small cell wireless facilities and what it means. So just generally, what is 5G? It's the 5th generation mobile network technology wireless standard that enables a new kind of network that is designed to connect virtually everyone and everything together, including machines, objects, and devices. It's the successor to the 4G networks, which provide connectivity to most current cell phones. 5G wireless technology is meant to deliver higher peak data speeds, more reliability, massive network capacity, increased reliability, and a more uniform user experience to more users for broadband cellular networks. Cellular phone companies began deploying this technology worldwide in 2019. So you have small cell wireless facilities, and they're referred to as SWF. They are critical to the wireless industry's deployment of the 5G services due to their heightened transmission speeds and capabilities. A SWF is a type of cellular network infrastructure that typically takes the form of small antennas, generally 3 to 4 feet tall, that are placed on existing infrastructures such as utility poles or street poles, or street lights, and are accompanied by equipment cabinets installed lower on the pole. SWFs are relatively new and supplement cell towers, and cell towers can reach up to nearly 100 feet high and are designed to cover larger geographic areas. So under New Jersey's law, municipalities must give consent before an SWF can be placed on an existing pole in a public right-of-way and prior to the installation of a new pole within a public right-of-way. The ability of a municipality, however, to regulate these SWF installations is limited by the provisions of the Telecommunications Act and the declaratory ruling and order that came out of the FCC in 2018. That FCC order lifted regulatory barriers that inhibit the widespread deployment of infrastructure necessary to support these 5G services by limiting the ability of local governments to regulate deployment of 5G wireless infrastructure. So the FCC order established specific timeframes for municipalities to review these SWF applications. It was called shot clocks. It set an application and annual fee structure, and it put some limits on the municipality's ability to impose aesthetic and location requirements of these facilities and related infrastructure. Specifically, municipal regulations may not prohibit or have the effect of prohibiting the ability of these entities from providing telecommunication services. So what has happened over the years, you do have municipalities and having the power to regulate the SWFs and related infrastructure through the adoption of right-of-way SWF ordinances. Many municipalities in the state have done so. When Mr. Bauman, my partner, was here last time, he talked about Hoboken, and they had adopted such an ordinance. And these ordinances generally do the following. They establish an application and review process. They create siting and aesthetic requirements. They may designate certain preferred locations. They set forth notice requirements, including notification of residents impacted by the installation and the development of a website, including project schedule, telecom information, safety, and frequently asked questions. And the ordinances also require annual reports and requires the execution of a right-of-way use agreement between the telecom provider and the municipality. So these ordinances have to still be in compliance with the federal order from the FCC. And it provides structure and control by the municipality by having such an ordinance. There is currently a bill pending in the legislature, A1116, which would provide uniform regulations for all municipalities in the state. It tends to be more leaning towards the wireless provider and giving the municipalities a little less power. So you have these wireless providers that come into municipality. They want to place their equipment on poles, and you do have the ability to regulate and control that to a certain degree through a ordinance. And I don't believe we have an ordinance right now in the borough to do that. So you should have probably in your next packet the summary that I just kind of went over that kind of lays this out. But generally, that's the state of where the municipal the small wireless facilities are right now in the state of New Jersey.
Thank you, Ms. London. Council members, I will ask if you have any questions of Ms. London before we open it for Mr. Maroney for commentary. Councilman Good. Councilman Good.
We didn't hear it.
Sure, my space bar wasn't working. No questions.
Okay, thank you. Councilwoman Pacheco.
I'm gonna listen to the public. I have no questions right now.
Councilman Fotopoulos.
Thanks, Mayor. Ms. London, the quote unquote right of way that they're referring to on borough streets is actually on private property. Does that have any, would they have to, would the utility have to pay or compensate the landowner, the property owner, if that were the case?
If it's on private property, they need to deal directly with the private owner. The regulation comes in with respect to public right-of-ways.
So the pole that they would want to use is on the private property. So, Mr. Kelsey, it is on private property. Our property lines go out to the middle of the road and we have it. Let me explain. There's an easement, and you might be right. It might not apply here, but there's an easement throughout the borough where if we were to vacate the street, we're responsible for the curbs and the sidewalks. And if we were to vacate the street, it would be, our property line would extend halfway out into the street. Currently, let me ask you this: does that mean that they would have the right to the same easement, or would they have to compensate the adjacent property owner?
You're talking about a provider coming in on a private property? I'm not sure I'm following the question.
Yeah, let's take it offline. Let me withdraw the question.
I may need a little more facts involved in that
right,
specific situation.
Right.
But primarily the regulation and the ordinances are to deal or to help with the public right-of-ways. When you start getting into private property, it gets a little more involved, and I would have to have more facts.
Yep, I'll get you more facts. And sorry for calling you out, Andrew. I saw you shaking your head. Thank you, Mayor.
So this would be just for me to understand in what we call simple terms in everyday language. So this would basically, so if there's a pole in front of my house, they would be able to go in there and set up the 5G connection to whatever they do, just like right now Files does, or whomever your cable carrier companies do. And then they would concurrently kind of set up, I guess, static stations throughout Keyport on these poles. And then typically, because they're public streets, that's the right of way, correct?
Right. You want to set up an ordinance to regulate the process. So when someone comes in and says, I want to locate the small wireless facility on a pole, they will have to follow a process. And that's the whole purpose of having an ordinance, to guide what happens as during that type of situation.
So this will kind of follow similar to an ordinance we have of, like, when we pave a street for 5 years, we have a 5-year block on gas and utilities coming in and breaking the street, that kind of thing. So we're basically being preventative and being proactive on them coming to us asking for approval.
Right, because right now, since the legislation has not passed, you are able to have a right-of-way agreement and control to some extent, and without, violating the federal act, what happens. And you want to have that control. And that right now you can do that. If this legislation passed, one of the things that they say you can't do is have a right-of-way agreement. So it's more of a law that's leaning more towards the provider versus the municipality.
So we wouldn't be grandfathered in if we create this ordinance and this passes.
Now, if the bill was to pass, then your ordinance would have to be revised to be in compliance with the new law. But it's a law that has been introduced since 2019, and it hasn't gone anywhere out of committee. So I don't know if it has likelihood of moving and how fast.
Okay. That's good insight. Thank you. That's it. That's my only questions.
Thank you. Councilwoman Davidson?
Ms. Linden, do you know, and if you answered this already, I apologize for asking again, but are we allowed to ask for a monthly or annual fee from the providers per poll to use it and have it in the borough?
There are certain fees that are allowed, and that's coming from the federal level. So you can't charge, there's reasonable fees that a municipality can charge. So there's a cap on what can be charged.
Okay. That was all I have right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman McNamara?
Hi. So from what I see, my gut is that we should put in a place right-of-way ordinance just to have a little bit more control over the here and now. However, the reality is if A116 goes through, it really means nothing then that we have this ordinance in place. But at least in the interim, we have some say over how it might play out. But everything that I've read in here gives me a lot of concern because all the way up the chain, as you mentioned, the support is for the wireless provider, not for people. And so that's my concern, because as we go up and up and up, the state says we'll override the municipalities. The FCC says, hey, we're all about the providers. So I guess the only thing we can do right now defensively is a right-of-way ordinance. The other thing that I have concern over are, we don't know anything about the health issues. And, if you look at the World Health Organization, while they'll say there have been no adverse effects, they then follow it up quickly with saying, but there's very limited research done on anything. And they are publishing in 2022 at this point, and that will be reviewing any kind of potential health risks that they come up with. So again, I think that being said, that the World Health Organization is looking to publish within the next year or so. If we can at least put some stopgap measures in place, that makes sense, so that we slow down the ship that's kind of out there. I mean, around the world right now, there's moratoriums while there's a lot of continued research going on. A lot of the positive reports coming out, surprise, surprise, are coming out from research sponsored by the telecom industry. So I think that, as a prudent thing, I would just suggest exploring the right-of-way ordinances. That's it.
I just have one more question for Ms. London. Does the right-of-way include, we do have like JCP&L poles here. Does the right-of-way include any pole that's within the borough, or does it have to be a pole not owned by utility company, or is that detailed that we need to be?
Yeah, there's actually a definition in the statute what constitutes a public right-of-way. So it would fall into that definition, and I do have that with me. Public right-of-way means the area on, below, or above a public roadway, highway, street, public sidewalk, alley, or utility easement, which is owned or controlled by the municipality.
That answers my question.
So if I'm understanding this, just to make sure, so JCP&L poles would be, they could pretty much do whatever they want on those, because those are owned by them. Is that yes or no?
If it's in the public right-of-way. Your control comes if a pole is in the public right-of-way.
Okay, they are, I think. So, okay.
Yeah, I think all the poles are.
Yeah, they are. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that we still had some leverage there.
Covered. Yes.
And it includes easements too, so,
yes.
Yeah, that's footnote 1 on the bottom of page 1. Okay, can I have a motion to open for to the public for this topic right now?
Motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, Mr. Maroney, do you have any questions for Ms. London or the council?
A couple of comments. Thank you for looking into this. I really, really appreciate it. And I also appreciate that there seems to be some caution among the council about, this whole technology and the potential health effects. I hope that, you guys were able to take a look at that 2-sheet PDF that I sent. There's a lot of cons in there. There's there's pros coming from the industry and from the government, and then I think you don't hear about many of the cons, and I think they're covered pretty well in that brochure. So I hope you take a look at that if you haven't already. And yeah, I would urge the council to create an ordinance, as other towns have done, regarding installing 5G, and whether that's 500-foot setbacks for multifamily residences, 500 feet from schools, things like that. I mean, which essentially would mean they wouldn't be able to run them up and down every single street in the town, which is what I think we really want to avoid. So again, thanks again for looking into it. And I'd love to see the summary, Ms. London, if I could.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Maroney. Any other members of the public that are on video? Please raise your hand if you have commentary. Mr. Graham? Mr. Graham, can you unmute yourself, please? Mr. Graham, can you unmute yourself, please?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Elmer Graham Jr., 22 St. Peter's Place. I just wanted to say I definitely agree with Mr. Maroney just said. We have to look at this very carefully and everything like that, especially in regards to the health effects on the citizens of our borough. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Graham. Anyone else on video have any commentary before we go to the phone lines? Okay,
Michael Lane, are you on the phone lines?
Yeah, we're going to the phone lines right now. Mr. Lane,
Okay.
you go first.
Yeah, small wireless facilities. The borough already has experience with that. The antennas that were installed down in the business district in Sam's are small wireless facilities. And they're about the size of a 25, 30-gallon trash can. And if you remember, they don't look very pretty, and we required the applicant to enclose them in chimney-type structures. So you have already some small wireless facilities in town, and they have limited range. And I don't know what their range is, but you have to have enough of these small wireless facilities to cover the total town. So there's probably one per block. And then you got the issue of these, they're going to be mounted on poles. And there's a real issue in town with the age of our poles and the strength of our poles. And so I would think one of the things we want to do is anytime they're going to put one of these trash cans up on a pole and we're in a waterfront area with nothing to block the wind, that those be brand new poles and have that as a requirement. If you're going to put one of these 5G small wireless facilities on a pole, it's got to be a brand new pole. Just look at the last nor'easter and the poles that we lost and the loss of electricity in the borough. And that's the real risk. There's a second risk is you take, for example, Hopkins Pharmacy. There's a pole right in front of Hopkins Pharmacy. It's probably at most 8 feet from a window. At most, maybe 10 or 15 feet from a bed. And this was an issue also down when we did the small wireless facilities in the business district. And so that's something you really got to deal with. The utilities right away, all the power lines and cables and everything, that delineates the utility right away. So that's where they can place these small network nodes or wireless facilities. So this is a big deal for Keyport because of the age of our poles and the fact that we're exposed to high velocity winds with nothing to break the wind. And these, if you look at the size of these small wireless facilities, they will create increased pressure on the poles in a heavy wind situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lane. Anyone else from the phone lines have any commentary on this topic of 5G?
John Merla, 34 Broad Street, Keyport.
Hi, Mr. Merla. Hello?
Hello?
Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. My question was, Mayor, a couple meetings back, we discussed Jersey Central Power and Light coming in and doing an inventory and an up-to-date status for the borough on the condition of the poles within the municipality. Have we made any headway with that? If you know.
Our government representative was actually called to active duty, so he is back in the state, and hopefully we are going to be setting a meeting up with him soon. I know there's also a committee, unofficial committee, that has been dealing with some of the BPU topics as a whole. And some of them were going to be speaking to a public hearing that they were going to be having, and I'm waiting for an update on that as well. So I know several mayors are expecting better service, I guess is the best way to say it, for our constituents as a whole. So it has not fallen off my radar, I'm appreciative of our government representative serving our country, but he is back and hopefully we'll be able to set up a meeting soon.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
No problem. Any other members of the public have anything, commentary on this topic? Can I please have a motion to close to the public?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Members of council, unless I hear any opposition, is anyone okay if we request Ms. London to move forward to draft an ordinance to move forward with whatever restrictions we can under the current guidance, and then we circulate that at maybe the next meeting or the following meeting after that, depending on Ms. London's timing. I don't see any council members in non-favor of that. And obviously, we would have to be an ordinance and discussion and all those things when it comes up, but I would like to request Ms. London to begin putting something together.
Yes, will do.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Maroney. To that point, I know technically we're on attorney's report, and 5G was a lot of work on Ms. London's part, and I do appreciate all the effort you put into this. On the flip side, we are talking about public utilities coming in and putting something on our property or on the right of ways. But what jurisdiction do we have on the flip side? As we all know, earlier this year, we discovered from a resident who was trying to have gas restored to her home that the New Jersey Natural Gas had removed a gas meter from the property prior to her purchasing it. That became an issue for the moratorium and so forth. Are we allowed to put some kind of ordinance in place that stops any public utility from coming in and ripping out meters without consent, regardless of how old the roadway is, and that our construction office has to be notified? Because I'm really kind of disheartened that they feel that they can come in just because someone has an idle account and take out a meter and causing people extensive reconnection fees, as well as damage to our borough property. This resulted in something last week that's still being investigated, so I don't know that I can go into further discussion about it. But that's the second time I think anyone on the governing body even knew that they were allowed to do this. Are we allowed to put something in place that stops that they have to at least let our construction office know, so we tag that property and we know that these meters are being taken out?
I can look into that further. There's probably some sort of requirement of notification. I believe the utility statute, which is a state statute, would trump anything done on a municipal level. But there should be some sort of at least a notification requirement involved. So I can look into that.
Okay. Anyone opposed on the governing body to have Ms. London look into this?
Absolutely
I think
not.
there needs to be some kind of
not at all.
checks and balance that we as a municipality know when gas meters are being ripped out of properties. Okay, great. Thank you. Ms. London, do you have anything else for your report before we move on to public?
Nothing else, Mayor.
Okay, thanks, Ms. London. Can I have a motion to open to the public?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone from the public have any commentary? Hands first, please, on video. Mr. Graham?
Yes, Elmer Graham Jr., 22 St. Peter's Place. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, couple things. On the marijuana law, from what I understand, and this is true, it disturbs me greatly. When I understand, if any underage teenage kid is caught smoking marijuana by the police can give them a warning, but they can't tell their parents. And that to me is very disturbing. And I think you all should look into that part, because that part of the marijuana law ties our police department's hands unnecessarily. Yes. Second is, yeah, hello?
Go ahead.
Second is, Madam Mayor, on the Veterans Committee. Have you heard any more about that?
No, I know I was hoping to have it set up and going by this week, but maybe by the end of this week, hopefully you'll have an email.
Okay. But as far as on that part of the marijuana law goes, you all should look into that part. And if that's true, that disturbs me greatly in tying our police hands there. Thank you.
I do believe that I have heard commentary that is what's in the new current regulations. So I would ask the police committee to review this with our police chief. And I'm not really quite sure that we get to override state legislation. If we can, then I think if the police department's in favor of that, then I think we can maybe circulate a resolution saying that we do want the parents to be notified, but I don't think we can override state regulation, but maybe we can.
Well, it needs to be fixed somehow. Thank you.
I agree. So I'm going to ask Councilmember Pacheco if you can bring this up at your next police committee meeting, please.
Yes, we'll do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public on video have any questions or commentary? Anyone on the phone lines?
John Marula,
Mike.
34 Broad Street, Keyport.
Hi, Mr. Miller.
Just one thing, Mayor, you had brought up tonight regarding Jersey Central Power and Light, and also touched on that a couple meetings ago, and now we've touched on New Jersey Natural Gas. And you bring up a very interesting and good point that the council had to take time out, research, spend money, as well as the applicant that applied on Main Street, having no clue of what they were coming into and buying a home that had a gas meter disconnected and taking away, and the options were very limited. And I know what you're talking about, what happened recently, and I won't get into detail either, but I will tell you this. Many years ago, the borough paved 3rd Street between Atlantic and Fulton, and where Mr. Councilman Good lives, as a matter of fact. After we paved, 17 days later, New Jersey Natural Gas came in and made 18 3x3 openings. Then we put a moratorium in an ordinance saying that you could not dig any streets in Keyport after they were paved for 5 years, 5-year moratorium, unless it was deemed an emergency by New Jersey Natural Gas and the borough engineer. And I will tell you this, I don't care what law we have in Keyport, superseding that says any utility coming into the borough of Keyport, upsetting and cutting any borough street opening, they need a permit. Regardless if it's a county road or a municipal road, you need a permit to do a 3x3 opening for a gas line. And this can be enforced locally. And I'm sure you know, as well as I know, there have been some discrepancies over the years where the utility companies did not apply for the permit. I think that gives the borough a lot of leverage. The council has to approve a street opening, whether it's an emergency or not. You have to approve a street opening, and that the purpose is so the borough engineer can go out and say they made the best repair on that street as possible. And I know for a fact there's a 5-year moratorium, because when we pass a resolution to pave a street, that's part of it. And
Yeah,
I'm just saying that I support you. I totally support you. You know, as well as the council knows, you pave a street and it's a great job. And then the gas company comes along and opens up the street, a 3x3, and then it turns into now spider cracks. It's never as good as the original. It's never as good. I don't care what infrared equipment they use or how good they patch it. It'll never be as good as the original, because water will get in the seams, it'll crack, and before you know it, we're back 15 years later resurfacing the same street. What's happened on 3rd Street? That's where I stand. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marla. Well, I agree with you. Those moratoriums are still in place. And as you're aware, the situation that happened earlier this year, it was a hard decision, but we backed the moratorium for that purpose. So, you know, last week was kind of disheartening. with what occurred. So the challenge is, in that particular circumstance, there's other things to still be looked into. And I'll defer to Jay. I'm not sure that I can discuss the
No, that's
topics,
fine.
but what I'm asking for is to take it even a step further, right? Because what I'm being told is if that was a county road, they do not have to come to us at all because it's their property, it's the county's property. The county gets to sign off on the permit. So since we have so many county roads in our municipality, I think a better checks and balance would be if we were able to have a resolution or an ordinance that anytime a utility is being removed from a property, that we're notified and we keep it in the file. It was just a check and balance that I don't know that we should have it as a requirement for our construction office to have to report that out all the time. But I think we should be aware when a gas service is removed from a property, whether they cut the road, however they do it. I think if there's a utility being removed from a location within our municipality, we should have to be notified. And then that would be the cross check of how are they going to do it. And then we would know if a road was going to get open. And that would be subsidiary to the moratorium that's already on the books.
Mm-hmm.
I'm surprised it doesn't happen already. It's weird.
And we found that out earlier this year, right? With the other property, a couple of houses away.
Yep.
Yes.
So if Ms. London, if you can look into that, if the council's not opposed to it. Okay. Anyone else on the phone lines?
Michael Lane.
Hi, Mr. Lane.
Couple of issues. Building on what Councilwoman McNamara said. Yes, we have a public hearing before an ordinance, but by then it's pretty well locked in, and we're just fine tuning it. After Sandy, with Mayor Almac's help, I ran a special meeting on living with flood risks in a coastal town. And it was open to the public, and it just went through all the issues of the risk level, the need for FEMA flood insurance, the cost characteristics of the flood insurance, and really ran a campaign to get people who had not bothered to buy flood insurance to do it. I think a similar kind of special meeting, living with marijuana, would just be a general presentation of the issues, and that the issues that the council is going to have to deal with. And that would be very informative and would also provide feedback to the council that they can use in crafting their ordinance. Second item, the attachments to the agenda. Probably 3 or 4 months ago, Councilman Good pressed an issue that the agenda and its attachments should be available by Friday, and they shouldn't change after Friday. And that was not out of alignment with what had been done for a long period of time. But now since then, we've sort of slipped to, well, amendments might be available on Saturday, then on Sunday, then on Monday. And for tonight's meeting, they weren't even available till noon today. And that really is not in alignment with supporting public participation in the meeting. And I urge you to follow the input that Councilman Good gave you, is that the agenda material has to be available, close of business on Friday, has to be posted. And if it's got to change, let it change in real time in front of the council with discussion by the council. Right now, I can't figure any reason why this agenda attachment wasn't available until noon today. Certainly, you could have pulled that one ordinance that got pulled during the meeting. Thank you.
Any other members of the public have any commentary? Going once? Going twice? Can I please have a motion to close to the public?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Can I please have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, everyone have a great evening. Thanks for great dialogue throughout this meeting. Stay well and be safe.
Good night.
Night,
Thank you.
everyone.